Happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to a special edition of the summer series with Career Journeys with Coach Stella. I am your host, Coach Stella. On this special edition, happy afternoon, happy Tuesday. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on your time zone. I am very, very excited for today's career journey with the wonderful, multi talented, multifaceted Miss Dubem Anabanam. Welcome, Dubem. How are you?
I'm good, Stella. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to come on and give your journey. Without further ado, we are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. We will get started right now. So, Dubem,
hmm
would love for you to just introduce yourself, your background, anything you would like the folks to know about you as we unpack your career journey, please.
hmm Yes. So my name is Dubem. I am an architectural designer and an artist. I do mixed media artwork. Um, as a kid, I was always into artwork since as long as I can remember. And for university, I went to SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design, to study architecture. And there I got both my bachelor's in fine arts and my master of architecture degree. Since then, I have gone on to work at multiple architecture firms, focusing on the residential realm to design custom homes and renovations. And I currently work at the Up Studio in Long Island City, New York, where we do custom modern homes and renovations.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I cannot wait to unpack that.
hmm
Further. So let's start from the very beginning. You talked about your love of art from a very young age. When you were, in your childhood, when you got asked the number one question, what do you want to be when you grow up? What came to mind for you? What was your vision?
My vision kind of went all over the place as I explored and figured things out. I at one point wanted to be a doctor when I was like in elementary school. And then as I got older, I realized what that actually means, and I was like, I think I'm gonna pivot to something else. So I explored a few different things. I thought about psychology. I thought about being a writer. But by the time I was a junior in high school, I actually took an engineering course at University of Maryland, a summer course for high school students to explore what they might want their major to be in college. And there, so I thought I wanted to be an engineer, but while I was there, I found architecture through another friend of mine who was also in the program. And through her, I learned what architecture actually means by going to their end of the year or end of the summer, what's called a pinup, when you pin up all your work onto a board and you explain what your project is, and the other students and professors critique it. So I realized through that pinup how artistic architecture is, and I saw an opportunity to blend the two things that I was interested in, art and engineering, and figured out a way to sort of create my own path, because a lot of with architecture there's different things you can focus on, whether you're focusing more on structural side, interiors, design. So I knew I wanted to focus more on design as opposed to the structural engineering route, which is why I chose Savannah College of Art and Design to go to for college, knowing that they had a really great architecture program, which was a 5-year program to have your bachelor's and master's after those 5 years. And I took it from there.
Awesome. So let's unpack that a little bit. You
Mhm.
said you went to talk to me about this. It sounds like it was a workshop through the University of Maryland. So you grew up in Maryland, and
Yes.
I imagine you went through your K through 12 experience. How did you come upon this program? What was your high school experience like that gave you that exposure?
hmm So in high school, I actually went to a high school that specializes in arts and humanities. So at that high school, I took so many different arts courses. So I knew that I liked art from a young age. I liked to draw. I did crafts just as a way to keep myself busy and to to relax, relieve tension, and also a way to communicate. I like to use my artwork as a form of communication. So at my high school, took literally almost all the arts courses, graphic design, animation, photography, whatever they offered. So I was like, I want to be an artist. And my parents actually found the University of Maryland program and were like, you should try engineering. To be honest, they were sort of pushing me towards that career path. They're both computer engineers, and so they figured, well, how about you try it out too? So I got into the program through my parents learning about it through another friend of theirs, and it was sort of like a summer camp, but actually at the end of the program you got a credit for a college course that you can use when you actually do go to college. So it was a whole summer program of taking an engineering college course in order to gain a credit at the end. And it was there that I sort of went up and down, learned what engineering actually entailed, and to be honest, got a little bit frustrated that it just didn't feel like the right fit for me. And again, I feel like I got lucky with that friend that I made who showed me what architecture is, knowing that I went to an arts high school and I took all the arts courses, but couldn't really find a direction. Architecture to me blends those two worlds of engineering that my parents introduced me to, art that high school introduced me to, and then I was able to choose a major moving forward into college.
That's awesome. Okay, well, that, we talk about the importance of these immersion programs for high school students through
Yes.
universities to get them exposed, career exploration. Careers of yesterday are not the careers of tomorrow, and it's only through those exposures programs
Mhm.
similar to what you experienced that we really get to dig deep and really blend career passion with personal passion. So I love that you had that experience. So you moved on to SCAD, Savannah School of Art and Design. Am I saying it
Yeah,
correct?
Savannah College of Art and Design.
Savannah College of Art and Design, SCAD, otherwise affectionately known as SCAD. So,
Yes.
talk to me. It was a 5-year program. Talk to me about your experience there, some highlights, and you know, just some highlights.
Mhm. So I discovered SCAD also in high school through the I forget what it's called now, but when colleges come and visit high schools to give information. And
College fair.
yeah, college fair, yes. So I discovered SCAD through the college fair and was like, oh, art school sounds great. And the fact that they had an architecture program was even better, because not all art schools do offer architecture, and at SCAD the architecture program does have a heavy focus on design, which again was something that I felt fits me better, working more on the design side than the structural or engineering side of architecture. So at SCAD, freshman year, what they do what's called the foundations courses, which they take their philosophy from the Bauhaus School of Design, which was a modern art school in Germany, in the mid 20th century, I believe. But so SCAD takes that kind of philosophy, and every student, no matter what major you go through, has to take the foundations courses, which are basic drawing courses, writing courses. Just they want all the students to start off on the same foundation, understanding the arts. And then you move from there onto your majors courses. By the time you're a sophomore, you really get into the majors courses. So for the architecture school, that included studio design courses, and we did also have to take structures and engineering courses, but a lot of the focus on the courses was for studio design and things of that sort. So by the time I was in the fifth year, the way that SCAD's program is set up is the 5th year is your graduate year. And things have actually changed now. It's now a 6-year program, which is more standard with architecture schools across the board. My class of 2014 was actually the last 5-year program that they're offered. So I got in there right on time to do the 5 years. But the 5th year and now the 5th and 6th year are the graduate year, which you take more intense studio courses, and then you have your thesis, which is the project that you create for yourself, basically. So the thesis project is a focus on design, a focus on architecture, whatever that means for you. And you create a project that takes the whole 1 to 2 years in order to complete the research behind the focus that you want to study. You have advisors, which are professors that are on your advisory team that help you develop your project, and then you write a thesis book at the end of those years. And so my thesis and thesis book actually took me a year and a half, and I think that's why they have the 2-year program now, because for a lot of people 1 year just wasn't enough. So I took an extension and I finished my thesis within a year and a half. And for my thesis in particular, I focused on residential design, but specifically multifamily residential design and housing, and how to create a housing system that blends different demographics, different economic levels, so that we don't have pockets of cities that are so segregated, especially, and the segregation usually comes with financial segregation. People are in different parts of the city, might have less funding, they might have less resources as opposed to another part of the city. And I found that to be really disappointing, because I know that we can do better. So my thesis actually focused more on urban design, studying um, how social structures work in cities and how to create safer cities by blending economic backgrounds, different demographic backgrounds within one housing unit. And so my idea was to have like walls that weren't permanent, but that would be able to create apartments based on what people's needs are when they move in. So if you can afford 1 unit of space, that's what you buy. If you can afford 3 units of space, like you can expand that to your personal needs, so that the building has a completely mixed social and demographic background that allows you to maybe experience and connect with and become friends with people that you might not have even crossed paths with before, because cities are so segregated financially.
I love it. It sounds like it's the foundation of affordable housing.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, it was
Wow.
a different type of affordable housing, basically. Instead of making, like, a whole building that's affordable housing for a specific financial background demographic, it's affordable housing within a building that also has regular regular priced housing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that
You
was
would
my
pay
thesis
for,
idea.
yeah, you would pay for the space that you
Yes.
can afford essentially, but you're still
Yes.
within community. Wow, that's
Exactly.
amazing. I don't think I knew that. That is awesome and innovative and
Thanks.
world changing. That okay. Thank you for
Yeah,
sharing.
I that was my goal, was to think of a different way that we can do things when it comes to housing. I think that when it comes to housing in urban environments, it nobody's really thought of something new. It's sort of like, this is what we do and it's super easy and let's just get it over with. But I find that creating those divisions actually creates cities that are not as safe. I think when you create these divisions between people and create pockets of the city that might be low income versus high income, even though those people live in the exact same city, they have nothing to do with each other and they are not looking out for each other. So it's like you can go to one neighborhood and not care that that's also your city. But blending these different neighborhoods together, blending financial groups together, blending different social groups together, you feel a neighborly attachment to the people who live in the same city, as opposed to that's over there. So on my thesis board, my thesis advisory board, I did have an anthropologist professor as well who talked to me and guided me through how people work and how people interact with each other. And then I translated that to architecture. Like for one instance, this is a random piece of information I'm going to share that I found out through my thesis study was um the disconnect that people have with what's happening on the ground if they live in a high-rise building. And somewhere like New York, you can't really change that much because everything is skyscrapers. But my project took place in DC. That's where I proposed my thesis project was in Northeast DC. And I limited the height of the building to 5 stories because through my research, I found that the higher the building, the less people care about what's happening on the ground. So let's say worst case scenario, somebody is getting mugged or a crime is happening on the ground. If you're on floor 12, it seems like that's less of my problem. I'm just gonna, let whatever happen. If you're on the 4th floor, you can interact more, you can yell at the window, you can hear what's happening. Like there's more of a connection with the street when you're not in a skyscraper. So in DC, that was easier to envision because of the because zoning laws actually don't allow for high-rise buildings. And so like 5 stories within that northeast neighborhood was about as high as I could build. So I used that as sort of a driving point for my design to be like, okay, mid-rise buildings are actually safer when it comes to taking care of your neighbors, taking care of your surroundings, and having a connection to the street and not feeling like it's completely closed off, separated, and segregated from your community.
Wow, that is fascinating. And as you were telling that important fact, I was thinking back to the 60s and 70s when we saw the increase of high-rise buildings for projects,
Hmm.
and how longitudinal studies show how that was systemically a horrible idea in so many
Yeah.
ways.
Hmm.
Number one being this connect of community when you're so, that high rises tend to produce. So
Hmm.
thank you for sharing that.
Yeah,
All
sure.
right. So it sounds like SCAD was the place. And it's interesting and both fascinating that through your college fair, saw this school, inquired a little bit more, and it actually just passion and purpose coming together. Um, and so, as the college counselor in me, it loves that. That's what I usually strive for my scholars to do is, let's find your fit. Let's find your fit.
Yeah.
What are your dreams? What are your passion? But then what are your values? What brings you joy? And let's see if we can merge the two and find you a community, a space,
Hmm.
educational environment where you can thrive. And it sounds like that's what SCAT did for you.
Hmm.
So let's talk about your first professional role outside of SCAD. Talk to me about the journey in obtaining it and some highlights from it.
Okay. So right after SCAD, I was a little bit burnt out from writing my thesis. And so I took about 3 to 4 months of not jumping into architecture immediately, and I actually worked at a frame shop for a little while, which helped me stay within my art background, but gave me a little bit of release while I figured out what to do next. And then from there, I started applying everywhere. I used LinkedIn. I asked around, and I just cast a wide net. I was like, let me see what bites. And not a lot was biting. And I felt like I was just doing the repeat thing over and over again. And so I decided to make face with people. And one of the things I did which was kind of awkward and didn't work that much, was just walking into architecture firms and being like, "Hi, could you give me a tour?" And there was one firm where they looked at me so crazy. They're like, "We don't do that." Um, but there was one firm where they were like, "We can't give you a tour, but we'll talk to you about what we do." So I really cast a wide net, and I want to say that even when it comes to that career fair and also taking the college course in high school, cast a wide net and see what you can catch, because you never know who you're gonna meet. At that college fair, I had no clue I was gonna meet the SCAD advisor. At my at the high school college course at University of Maryland, I had no clue I would make that friend who was in architecture. So keep open. But back to my career. So that didn't work as well, but it did help me to feel more comfortable talking to people and realizing that a rejection is not the end all be all. It's part of the process, and in fact it sort of helped me with my social skills. So my very first job was at an architecture firm in DC, and they did beyond residential. They did all sorts of things. They did public buildings, they did uh, university institutions, and they did like multifamily housing. And the way I got that job was I responded to an ad on LinkedIn, but then I did some research and I found that the firm was having an opening party, because they were opening the firm is based in Connecticut, and they were opening a brand new firm in DC, and there was like 12 principals at this firm, which is not standard, but they had twelve principals or partners, and one of them was relocating to DC and opening up her own branch of the firm. And so I did a little bit of research, who works there, what are they like, where's the firm located, and I went to their opening party. And I met people, I chit-chatted, I was just schmoozing, and then when it came to talk to what became my future boss, I told her that I had applied, and she was like, "Really?" Like she was impressed that I had both applied and showed up there and cared about meeting the people and getting to know who they are. And like next day, I got a call that they wanted to interview me. Went to the interview, already knowing my new boss, already knowing some of the partners who work there, and so I had like half a foot in the door already. So showing face is really important, especially these days with everything being online, everyone communicating online, and you never know who you're talking to online. And so when you put a face to that name, or like a real moving face to that profile picture, it builds trust. So I was getting nowhere until I went to that opening party, showed face, and it doesn't have to be an opening party. It doesn't have to be walking in cold. Like there are ways to meet people in real life. But I think that showed them that I was really serious about being a member of their team. And literally next day I got an interview.
That is awesome. And you dropped so many different gems as far as strategizing of how to stand out. I love it. Thank you so much for being transparent. And,
Hmm.
you talked about, it didn't work, but it did, because you did
Yeah,
take
that's true.
versus whether it was confidence, whether it was practice, and it landed you into, it's interesting when you cast a white net and you try something out, even if in at that moment it doesn't feel like you were successful, it dares you to think further out the box. Like, what
Yeah.
else can I try? Because you're already out there. Let's see what other pivots I can make. And that's exactly what landed you at that opening to for a role that was open. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
so let's move forward. You talked about you landed in different firms throughout. How did that? How? What were those experience? What was that experience like? Going through the different firms, the lessons you took from there that helped you land where you currently are today.
Hmm. So I've worked at three different firms before I landed here at the Up Studio. There was that first firm in DC that had their uh, their main, excuse me, office in Connecticut. And so with that firm, what I learned is I learned a bit of business building, and I've always worked at small firms, which for me has been really helpful when it comes to understanding how the business of architecture works, and being able to be a part of different processes or different roles within the process of building from beginning to end, and not stuck simply in one role in the middle. Um, so at that firm, they were building their business and they didn't have a lot of projects in DC yet. So I spent a lot of time going to RFP meetings, and that's request for proposal. That usually, like, public institutions will be like, we are doing this project and we don't know what architect to use, come and propose your idea. So I spent a lot of time going to those sort of meetings and pitching our firm and pitching our idea and trying to get business. And same with applying for jobs. Not everything bit, but I was going all over the place in DC, Maryland, Virginia, trying to get projects for the firm. But after a while, we weren't getting enough projects to keep money flow coming in. And so I just, after a while, didn't feel like it was the right place for me financially. I wanted to level up a little bit, move out of my parents' house. Um, so I found a different firm through interviewing. This one I actually found just on LinkedIn, cold applying, got an interview, and found another firm in DC, another small firm of 7 people. Um, and that firm also did some institutional work and some residential work as well. So it was blended. And again, I always really loved the residential side. I loved getting into the smaller details, the nitty gritty, understanding who the family is who's going to live there, and getting real personal with the design, as opposed to public institution design is a little bit more rigid. You sort of are given like a kit of parts of what to work with, and you organize it from there. With residential design, you have a bit more choice when it comes to the design, the finishes, the what the end product looks like. So at that second firm, I was able to, again, learn a little bit about how business works through my boss who was there, and would have meetings with us about, like, from beginning to end. Like, once the project is signed on, we're brought on. Like, it's not like the project is signed on and goes through phases, and we when I say we, I mean the architectural designers coming in at the middle. It's like from beginning to production, we are involved in the project. So after a while, I left that firm as well. Um, I wanted to do residential design, and that's it. So I left that firm and decided to join another firm that only did residential design, just ground up houses and renovations in Maryland. I found that job through a recruiter who I reached out to through, I believe it was also through LinkedIn, and she connected me with that new boss. And same small firm, 5 people, and I was the designer there. And so that firm was just residential. Again, I sort of was like creeping towards the residential design, knowing that that's what I wanted. The first firm was a bit of a blend, but all the RFPs I was going to were for like schools or like other public institutions, hospitals. And so the next firm got a little bit more of the residential design, but we still had those larger projects. We had some government contracts, and so those were really complicated to manage and handle, especially at a small firm. I was wearing a lot of hats. And so I felt like I just want to focus on housing. So I found that third firm, which was based in Maryland, and we simply just did housing design, and I loved it. But eventually that firm didn't have a need for an architectural designer anymore. They were sort of, again, small businesses. As you're growing with the business, things can happen financially, and it's unfortunate, but I decided that, okay, time to pivot again. Um, and I, for a long time, I'd wanted to live in New York. And so I was like, let me just try it. Like, there's nothing holding me back. There's nothing holding me to Maryland besides the fact that it was familiar. I grew up there. I like Maryland. but I was like, let me try this New York thing. Let me see what happens. So when I interviewed at the Up Studio, they were just looking for a part-time architectural designer. So I was like, okay, I got my foot in the door, but I still need to make some money to live in New York. So I had another job at an architecture firm in Brooklyn. And so I would go back and forth, half time here, half time at the firm in Brooklyn, until eventually the Up Studio started growing some more and they needed a full-time architectural designer. So now I've been here for 6 years.
Awesome. Awesome. What a journey. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for being transparent and sharing that with us. So many nuggets. And I love a full circle moment. So it's amazing that you kept yourself open to the roles that you came your way, or that you went for it, and nothing comes to you. Go for it. But you kept yourself open, and then as you continue to gain these different experience, learn the business of the industry you're in, you were able to say, okay, this is where I want to land. And it's fascinating, a full circle moment, that you wanted to land where you based your thesis off, as being in residential. And I earlier heard you talk about how you get to know your clientele a little bit more. You get to learn their story, and then from
Yeah.
there, design it based on their stories and their backgrounds. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, we are almost at time.
Oh
So
wow.
we could talk about these journeys forever.
Yeah.
But I want to just give you space to talk about what's on the horizon. So you've been with Up Studio for 6 years now. Um, what does career progression, where do you see yourself in the future? What are some dreams that you are looking to go after?
Mhm. Well, the Up Studio is
Did I
still
freeze?
growing. Yeah, you froze. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Cool. So luckily I'm in a place where the Up Studio is still growing a bunch. And I feel like that's sort of been something that's been a theme in all of my jobs so far is they're always growing businesses. But I personally find it very educational because I'm like, maybe one day I want to start my own business. And so it's great to see behind the scenes. And the Up Studio is growing and growing. When I started, there was 7 people. I was the seventh, and now we're up to 15 people and growing. So my plan is to continue growing with the business and see where it goes. We're expanding our office. We're making moves. We're getting more projects. So it's really exciting to see the level of projects that we're doing now based on what we were compared to what we were doing when I first started. So I've been taking on a little bit more of a managerial role when it comes to certain projects. I work a lot more on the interior architecture side. I made that sort of switch a couple years ago. I told the partners that I really love to think about what the clients interact with on a regular basis. Again, that's something that I've really always loved, and I found that that's like kind of my niche is residential design because it's so personal and you get to know who the people are and you get to create something that they'll live in. And you're like, I did that. I made their space comfortable. I made their space functional. Um, I made their space something that they want to grow in and bring their family, like raise their family in. Like that's really cool. And so with interior architecture, it's more of a focus on the the walls, doors, picking finishes, everything you interact with on the interior of the building. How one of our partners likes to describe the difference between interior architecture and interior design is if you were to take a house and cut off the top and turn it upside down, everything that falls out is interior design. So those are like couches, tables, all those little fixings and decorations. Everything that's fixed is interior architecture. So when the architecture team works on the core and shell of the building, that is what we call the exterior walls, the structure, including columns, beams, structural slabs, and the roof. And then I come in and do the stairs, the interior walls, all of the built-in millwork, um, things like that, and pick finishes. So that's where I am now, is understanding more of like really getting detailed on what I like. Again, I feel like went all over the place, but it's because I'm like, I want to do what I like and not just be passive about it. So started off at that firm in DC doing institutional work. I'm like, I want more residential stuff. Got closer and closer to that. And now that I'm at a firm that does residential design, I'm like, I want to focus on the tactile elements of it, the interior architecture that people interact with every day, and have more of that personal relation with our clients.
Awesome. Awesome. Can you hear me? Am I still delayed a little bit?
You're good.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right. So, Dubem, thank you so much for joining us today, sharing your story, so many nuggets and gems that you have shared. Now, as you look back on your journey and you think about the next generation, what advice or words of encouragement would you give the next generation as they dream about the architecture industry?
hmm I would say, mm, for some reason, the first thing comes to mind is don't be afraid of other people. Don't be afraid of like getting your foot in the door. Don't be afraid of talking to people. Like, don't fear. And also don't fear being the only one in the room. And what I mean by that is, me as a Black woman, for most of my career, I've been the only one in the room. And when I did start off in architecture school, I was a little bit discouraged because I saw that it was mostly people who don't look like me. And I asked myself, do I belong here? Am I supposed to be doing this? It's such a small number of Black women who are registered architects in the states, and that's another thing that is on my career goal, is taking the architecture registration exams. I've already completed all of the hours that are needed in order to start sitting for the exam. You have to complete a certain amount of hours in different categories, and now that I've done that, I can start sitting for the exams. There's 5 of them. So it's a whole process from grad school to doing your experience hours and then to taking the exam to become a fully licensed architect. And there's a full list of all fully licensed architects on the American Institute of Architects database. And there's literally, I think, I'm not going to throw out a number right now because I don't remember it, but not a lot of Black female architects. And so I felt like, I felt like I was always the only one in the room. But don't be afraid of that. Don't worry about what other people think. Just know I belong here and focus on what your goal is. Like, I would just stay focused on, I want to design. I want to design architecture, and then it became more narrow. I want to design houses. I want to design interiors. So I would say focus on your goal. Don't be afraid of talking to people and cast a really wide net. See what comes back. You really never know. And understand that making mistakes is part of the process. Those mistakes, I say mistakes because they're not, it's just learning. It's a learning opportunity.
Yep. Yep. They're not L's. Well, they are L's, but they're lessons. They're lessons.
Yes, I love
Yes.
that.
Thank you so much, Dubem. All right, that is our time together today for this special edition of the summer series of Career Journeys. The wonderful and incredible Dubem Anabanam. Thank you so much for coming on this afternoon. So I would love to end with some spitfire questions. I do with all
Yes.
my guests. Top of mind answers only. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
All right. So, if you didn't have to work, how would you spend your 40 to 50 hours a week? What would you be doing?
Ooh, painting. I love painting. I love mixed media artwork, sculpture, um, drawing, and I still get to do it on the side, like on evenings, weekends, and I actually had my first solo art show in Brooklyn in 2023. So that was a lot of fun, and I've been in other smaller group shows as well. So it would be fantastic to just do that all the time because it gives me such a great level of peace. Painting and artwork has always been my outlet. So that's what I would do.
Love it, and not surprised at all. If there is a food, whether it's savory or sweets, that brings you back to childhood, what is it?
Ooh, a food from childhood. Wow. The first thing that comes to mind is grilled cheese. That's like one of the first things I learned how to make on the stove on my own. So that was like my first like childhood recipe on my own was learning how to make a grilled cheese.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Last book, TV show, podcast, fiction or nonfiction that you found impactful.
Mm, hmm. So I've read the book There Was a Country by Chinua Achebe. That is a Nigerian author, and the book is about the history of Nigeria and the history of Nigeria gaining its independence in the Biafran War. That book really speaks to me, and so does his other books. I'm first generation Nigerian, and growing up in America, I was always focused on American things, and I sort of took for granted that my parents had this whole history behind them that I just didn't know. So reading Chinua Achebe's book helped me understand the history of Nigeria and the history that my parents grew up in, and so and a much more educational level. So I appreciate his writing.
Awesome. Awesome. One of my favorite authors as
Yes.
well. All right. And the last question, what was your last touch grass moment? Meaning, what was your last outdoor adventure?
Outdoor adventure. Let's see. I love just taking walks through the city. I New York actually has really great parks. So like I'll take a walk to Central Park, Morningside Park, Riverside Park. So that's that's my most recent touch grass moments because I live in Manhattan. So I walk to parks and I try to find the areas that are not as crowded and I breathe. I breathe. I touch trees. I just sort of remind myself that there is so much nature out there, even in a city environment.
Awesome. Awesome. And I know I said this was the last question, but I lied. I got to get your professional opinion on this.
Yes.
What city in the US, we'll keep it narrow, what city in the US has the best architecture in your professional opinion?
Oh, wow. That is a great question. The best architecture. Okay. I really like Philadelphia's architecture. And the reason why is because they've preserved a lot of their historic buildings and have renovated them on the inside as opposed to changing the face of those buildings. I find that in cities like New York and DC, they're developing so fast, and a lot of the new buildings are those like glass face buildings, a little bit cold, a little bit uninteresting. And Philadelphia has done really great at their historic preservation, and so has Baltimore. So, and I love history of architecture. I love seeing the different eras that you can tell where it's from based on the facade of the building, like whether it's from the early 1900s or the 80s. So I feel like historic architecture does show its age in a good way on the exterior, and a lot of that's been is being taken down these days, being demolished, and then these new glass buildings are being put up. So that's my personal opinion. I love historic architecture, and Philly has done a great job on preserving it.
Awesome. Awesome. Shout out to Philly. Shout out.
Yeah.
All right. Dubem, thank you so much for joining
Thank
in.
you.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We have a double header for you this week. Tune in this Thursday at the lunch hour or pre lunch hour, depending on your time zone, for another segment of our career journeys. We got our last two guests coming up these next 2 weeks. Thank you all so much for continuing to tune in. Tell a friend, and we will see you on Thursday. Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you for having me, Stella.
Absolutely.